Well, I really never thought we were going to see the day. I really didn't, especially after the early goalie pull and then the puck off the skate and it goes in. And I'm like, here we go. Another late goal. I actually kind of thought they might get one in regulation. Like they were pushing a little bit there and puck was kind of going their way. And a lot was going the way that I think it should have been going. And then makes it to overtime, and I just thought it was a miscommunication. Like Dorofiev decides to go into the zone where I think it was a little bit too early. I think Eichel may have thought he was offside because he was indeed offside. In that situation, you probably just want to circle it back around or just take it in and take the draw. But yeah, that's just not a lot of Dorofiev having played in 3-on-3. I think it's a little bit of a miscommunication. There's really no reason for him to jump into the play in that situation early. Yet the puck goes away. Hannafin really wanted to support the play, and I don't really have a big problem with that. Unfortunately, he ends up not recognizing the puck has been lost off the stick early enough. He's got his back sort of turned to it, trying to get up the ice, and you end up in a situation where they get a pretty easy walk-in breakaway. And Hill's not particularly great at those. McCann is pretty much the guy you don't want the puck on his stick in that situation, and they walk away with a loss. Nonetheless, it's 3 points in the two road games. It's not terrible. I don't think they played particularly great in either game. I don't think they really had an awesome period outside of the first maybe 14 15 minutes or whatever it was. In this period, you'll certainly take that, and I thought that was a portion that looked really good in this game. It got really, really helter-skelter there in the second period, and that's not necessarily what we want from the Golden Knights. The way that they're currently built, you don't really want that without Stone in the lineup. You'd really like to have that game be a little bit more under control, and it just frankly was not. And that leads to them getting and really what's interesting, they don't even score on it being a crazy up and down game. They kind of score on this weird face-off double lost stick battle behind. They get it out front, and nobody's able to defend Tanev right in front of the goal there. So yeah, it's disappointing. Like you look at the game as a whole, and it's like, what do you want to take away from this is kind of the way you have to kind of look at this. Is like, do you want to take away that they were in a pretty good position to win this game, certainly after the first period, certainly at the good portion of the first period, without Stone? Understandably, the power play is not going to be as lethal. Nice of them, the Kraken, to give us 5-on-3 for 2 minutes, which allowed the power play to look good. But really, you look at that third period one, and it's just not going to be the same, because when the puck gets down to Wah, it's not nearly as dangerous a situation, and he's not nearly as proficient as getting it from that spot into Hurdle. So I think, like, as much as we've been excited about the power play, it is going to come down to, do they have Stone, Eichel, and Hurdle all available? I think whoever's up on the top is kind of interchangeable, and I think as long as you have someone who's willing to shoot, and I think they have three options there, and we've only seen two of them so far, there's an argument that any of Olofsson, Dorofiev, or Holtz in that spot are going to be perfectly fine. I do think you're starting to see teams kind of attack Dorofiev a little bit more in that situation. He's going to have to get kind of used to that and be ready to move the puck a little bit quicker. I think that will come as time goes on. But looking at this game, for me, it's nice to see the good start. It's nice to see that it wasn't necessarily like a breakdown. I didn't think that the team broke down to allow 3 goals in a row. Like, sometimes road team, they're really wanting that win. Chandler Stevenson's got money on the board, probably. There's a lot of excitement for them in that game. Unfortunately, they're able to get that goofy goal. I'm not really sure what Hill's doing, trying to poke check out at that one. But to me, it's the structure of the setup in the first place that allows that, which is the problem. So that one, puck ends up behind the goal. You get a full change for both teams. And the Golden Knights have a very straightforward 1-1-2 setup. They hit the puck out to the side, and at that point, it should not be a simple stretch pass into the middle. They get that pass, and that pass is then an easy bump out to the edge. Like, there cannot be all of this room. They get a little stretch pass, one touch bump pass, and they're in the zone, and that's much easier. Like, that can't be when they're set up behind the goal. Like, that's the type of structure that I think the Golden Knights have been way better at historically under Cassidy than they have this year. I think this has been the worst year that they've been structurally in the neutral zone, in their own end. You think about the second goal, That's both defensemen underneath the goal line, and now you've got nobody on that back post. Tanev's able to pop that one in. So it's like all of that portion of it's all kind of frustrating. But I'll look more at some of the positives and get into some of the things that I think are starting to look like they're going to become commonplace for the Golden Knights, and it's going to give them hopefully more leeway now that we don't know how long Stone's going to be out. We will see. But first, I'll tell you that this Periscope and all Periscopes are brought to you by the Jimmerson Law Firm. The Jimmerson Law Firm is one of Las Vegas's preeminent law firms specializing in high-stakes business, civil, and family litigation. When winning matters, seek out the Jimmerson Law Firm. Golden Knights are heading home, so winning probably is going to continue mattering there as they have been perfect at home. Tough game, tough situation. You got the game in between the two road trips. It's a home game. It's a difficult opponent. It's an opponent that honestly concerns me with the way that the Golden Knights have been playing, even at home. I think that if the ice gets tilted a little bit in Carolina's favor, it's going to be tricky. That being said, it's still a home game. They've been shooting the puck very well. I don't know whether they're going to have Stone or not, but they should be all right to be able to do some good things still at home. Then they go on the road to Anaheim and Utah, and it's Dad's trip, and they don't lose on Dad's trip basically ever. It's two winnable games. It's Dad's trip. Like, I'm not going so far to say I'm putting 4 points on the board right now, but I feel pretty confident about it. I'd be surprised if they go to Anaheim and don't play a good game against Anaheim with the Dads in the building, and then going up to Utah for the first time ever. Utah was a little bit tricky in their own building, but to me, they should be fine. So getting the point here, getting the 2 points in Edmonton, coming from behind in both of them, and coming from behind in the Utah game, like they're fine. Like yes, things do have to start progressing in a little bit more positive way, but they're still getting points. They're still getting things done. They're still putting themselves in a good position. And I think a couple of things jumped out to me. Number one, beyond anything today, is how dominant Pavel Dorofeev was. He was excellent in this game, like really, really good. And it's not just him sitting on the elbow there taking these shots on the power play. It's not simply finding soft spots in the zone and hitting shots that are going to give him all these goals. Like, that's not even all of what he's doing, and he is doing all of that. I think the bigger part with him is his forechecking has been really good, and it's an interesting style of forechecking that has been effective in the Cassidy system, and he's very, very good at it. And basically what it is you get a back above the puck as quickly as possible, but stay in the zone and get in that passing lane. If you can get in the exit passing lane, they're going to have to throw a puck through you. And if you're able to make a good play with your stick, and he did it a couple of different times today, he did it against Utah. He did it one time in the Kings game that I remember. If you're able to get that done, you're going to generate a lot more offensive zone time. And when they have offensive zone time with that line, that's where they're going to be able to be very dangerous, because that's where Hurdle can really take steps in the right direction to help the team a lot more at 5-on-5 than he is. And if it's an up and down game, when the puck's going back and forth. And at one point I saw it was like, this is a good situation that the Golden Knights are in a position where they can get a forecheck going. They can hold the puck in the offensive zone. And it was kind of in that third period where I said they needed a long shift. They needed an offensive zone shift. Or maybe no, it was the second period. And I thought they were going to get it from Hurdle, holding onto the puck and bringing it into the corner, but you saw the foot speed wasn't quite there. Dorofeev creating some of these turnovers and being strong through the neutral zone's really been helpful. And really, I think is going to help this team in the long run find a way to get more out of that group. And they've been pretty good. Howden's been good. I can make an argument Hurdle's been the worst at 5-on-5 of that trio. And that's good. Like, that's a good thing to have. That's a good problem to have at this moment. I think Dorofeev, he's become stronger. He's become much, much more consistent with how he's getting back, how he's playing defense, how he's done along the walls in the defensive area. Like, he's been very, very good this season. And I know everybody's going to look at the 8 goals and we're all going to go about that and say leading goal scorer on the team, and that's why he's been so good. To me, it's been so much more than that. And even if the goal scoring does slow down, and I'm assuming it probably will at some point, the fact that he's doing everything else is very exciting. And I do think there is an argument to potentially look at figuring out, maybe does he fit with Eichel? I'm not sure yet if we're there. I thought Wah was good enough on that line, especially earlier in the game. I felt pretty good about it, but maybe they want to look at that when you start getting to try and balance these things a little bit out more. We'll see. Maybe if Stone comes back, they can look, and I think there's some changes that can potentially happen that we can look at to make things well. So let's get to this real quick. Stone says that, or sorry, Cassidy says that Stone is being evaluated by doctors and that he flew back to Vegas. Um, first off, like the whole day was kind of leading up to the news that we ended up getting basically right before the game. When they put a guy on IR to move the roster from 23 down to 22, there's usually a reason for that. Almost always. There's basically no reason to put Nick Hague on IR if they're not expecting to actually do something else. When you look at the roster, you had the healthy player in Korzak. The argument's then pretty much clearly going to be it's going to have to be a forward that's going to come up. Who's the forward injured? We looked at the end of the last game. He's wincing on the bench. It didn't look good. It was pretty clearly going to be Stone. So this whole charade of whatever was going on towards the end of the day before the game of like, oh my goodness, it's breaking news. This is wild. Like, that's not what happened. I also assume he wasn't on the ice at morning skate, and there were plenty of people there, and that didn't really ever come out. So I don't understand why it took so long to give information that was inevitably going to be the case moving forward. Now, as to the injury, if you look at the video, and we got a couple of things on the video, we got a different video in the pregame show as well. There is a slash or a swipe or whatever you want to call it from McDavid towards his foot. But to me, it's first off, it's reaching. It's kind of away from his body. It doesn't look like it has a ton of power on it. And then I thought it got kind of underneath the boot. Like I thought it might have even just hit the skate. I'd have to look at the different angle, but to me, that didn't appear to be what it was. He then comes around the corner. He's kind of shaking out that left leg. Um, I'm concerned of what it can possibly be because we've heard in the past, we've heard some of the things about how this goes that when it's the back, if it is the back, that it doesn't always materialize as injury and pain directly in the back. Sometimes it's a shooting pain down your finger. Sometimes it's a shooting pain down your leg or in your elbow or whatever. I'm concerned about that. And to me, until we get information that very clearly says it's not his back, and I think that it's easy for them to say whatever they want about, you want to call it lower body, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. I think it's until we get it is not his back directly, probably from Cassidy, McCrimmon, or Stone himself. I think it's going to be hard for everybody to have any belief that it's potentially anything else. Like, hopefully it's not, but there is certainly concern there. And if it is his back, and if that is what happened, that it's effectively a non-contact. Like, I don't want to go completely there because there was some contact. I think it is possible that maybe his skate backs up or whatever it happens to be, that it could be that. So until we get information that it is not that, it is certainly going to be concerning. He flies back to Vegas, is what was said there. I don't know. Like the whole thing to me is not good. I also, yeah, like this portion of it, I alluded to it a little bit. Why was it announced 5 minutes before puck drop? Like to me, that's a little bit of a sign that there's concern there. That if it was something that they weren't all that concerned about, that if he was just on the bench and it's like, let's be precaution, let's do the precautionary thing, let's not worry about this all this much, we're not that concerned about it. I don't think we would have seen this weird, drawn out ignore it for a good majority of the day, show a video from morning skate that doesn't have Stone in it because it wouldn't, but that video shouldn't have him in it. The press conference ends up being 3.5 minutes long, and then there's an allusion later to there potentially was a question asked in it about Stone not being there. Nobody tweets out that he's not there. The only people that were there are members of the Golden Knights traveling staff that are employees of the Golden Knights. I don't fully understand why it wouldn't be just announced. It doesn't really make sense to me, other than there is concern and they are hoping that no one worries that much about it for that extra 5 hours before the game, and that the game then takes away any fear of it. I don't know. I don't understand it. It's weird to me. He probably wasn't at morning skate right there. It's pretty clear that something happened. Then I don't know. I'll just leave it. I'll just leave it there. Let's go to this one. What does Roenbjerg's call up say about Brisson standing? Like, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that even with a top six player going out and them needing a top six right winger, that Brisson could potentially be that player, that they end up going a different direction. I think it says a little bit about Tanner Lazinski, who has been really good and was really good up here. I think it says more about Brisson, though. I think they just haven't quite seen enough out of him at this point. I think they knew what they were going to get with Roenbier. The decision is, do we want to put Brisson there, or do we put Wah there? And then what do we need? If they decide to go with Wah, which ends up probably being the right decision because he ends up getting the goal. If you go that route, do you want Brisson next to Schwint and Kolazar? Probably not. Roenbier fits a little bit more there. Now, obviously, Roenbier gets hit in the face with the puck, goes out, doesn't play a majority of the game. That's disappointing. So we don't get to see a lot from him. They've said that there's potentially more offense there. I need to see a lot of it before I truly believe that. But yeah, it's definitely concerning, and it's kind of starting to go down a little bit the path that we saw with Cody Glass. Where the opportunities come, he doesn't really take it to a great level of success. And then the opportunity goes, and now the next opportunity is given to somebody else. The concern is now that I don't know what the value would even be. Like I've seen people mention, like, oh, maybe they potentially will package him in a trade or go down that road. But I think with the number of times that he's had opportunities to get there, with how long ago since it's been when he was drafted, the age of where he is, the production in the AHL, it just doesn't scream this is a first round pick at this point, or at least it certainly isn't that value. I don't think that's completely dead. I like a lot of the things Brendan can do, and I've said this before. Brendan has the ability to do something that very few people do, and that's if he gets open ice with the puck on his stick, he's got a great chance of scoring. You cannot give him that opportunity. The problem is, to this point, he hasn't found that opportunity enough at the NHL level. And he really hasn't earned Cassidy's trust off the puck enough to get enough of those chances to put himself in a position to be valuable and to be the one that gets called back. Because if you look at this situation, if it's longer term with Stone, if it's 10 games, if it does happen to be that long, and Roenbier plays them all, he would then have to go back through waivers. Probably not an ideal situation, especially with the waiver stuff that's gone on so far. Wouldn't shock me if Edmonton's just chomping at the bit to wait for another guy from the Golden Knights to go through waivers, and they're going to take him, whoever he happens to be, just to get back at Vegas. Like, I could see that being the case. You don't want to get to that. So Brendan's waiver exempt. You have this opportunity. You could potentially bring him up, put him in a top six role. They end up not doing that. I do think that's not particularly good. That being said, one of the waiver players that the Golden Knights did pick up this season that has been in the lineup basically every game since they picked him up is Cole Schwint. And I think he was great today. Like, I thought this was the best we've seen out of Cole Schwint. The best thing in Cole Schwint's game is using his body to forecheck. He's got a good stick. He's got good instincts in the offensive zone. He's not a terribly offensive player, but that's okay. That's not necessarily what that line needs. That line needs to get to the front of the goal, get the puck in the blue paint, and find a way to make life difficult on the other team. I thought he did a great job of it today. And so far, this season, we've seen more of Schwint on the wing than we have in the center. We saw him a little bit in the center, but he was very new to the team, trying to figure out exactly what was going to happen. I didn't think he was all that impactful. That being said, he did have his assist on a play where he gets back above the puck, knocks it down, and gets it over to Theodore. And there we are getting that play. I think he's going to be more impactful as a center than he has been as a winger. So, while it is obviously frustrating that Waz no longer the fourth line center for the time being, he has to move up. You have to bring a player that's obviously nowhere near the level of Stone into the lineup, but I do think you're going to get a little bit of a pop from Schwint, and I don't think that fourth line is going to drop off too bad in this in the situation that they're currently in. So that's a huge positive because they take that player away. I know all of the hooplas about Raphael Lavoie We'll see if anything ever comes of that. Another guy would have been interesting if he would have been the guy that would have gotten called up in this situation. That would have been a bit of a story. Was not another kind of sign for people asking, what did the signs show us? Not necessarily ready to go with Raphael Lavoie instead of Jonas Roenbier. So Schwindt's been good. Like, I think Schwindt's been a solid player doing the things that they need down the lineup. I talked about it a lot this offseason that a lot of the wingers, a lot of the depth forwards of this group before Pearson, before Schwindt, are not necessarily excellent players in forechecking, excellent players in reloading, excellent players in neutral zone defense along the walls to get the puck out of the defensive zone. Like, that's not really how this team was built. So to be able to go out and get Pearson on the PTO, and he's been pretty solid so far this season, to get Schwindt, now put him back to his natural position and get a little bit more out of him, I think you're starting to see the team round into form a little bit more to be a lot deeper than it looked like what it was going to be. Holtz has become usable in every situation, which is nice. I don't think they're putting him in the defensive zone all the time, but paired up with Carlson and with Pearson, there really hasn't been much of a problem there. So he kind of puts himself in a much safer position than I thought we were coming in. Dorofeev has kind of taken that step forward, and he's been much more consistent. But the bigger part of it to me is that they have been able to get this out of Pearson, out of Schwindt, so that there's not holes down the lineup like it looked like all summer long. I don't think that these are players that have filled in and are going to take the Golden Knights from being a middle of the road to good team all the way up to a great team. I'm not sure I'm there yet, but it definitely does make them deeper. It definitely does put them in situations like a game like today, where at times you need that good offensive zone shift, and that group is able to offer it. We've seen a lot of the same out of Kolazar. We've seen a lot of the same out of Howden. A lot of good things have happened playing that style of hockey, and that's the style of hockey that I think Cassidy teams succeed the most under. When you're getting that, you need players that, or to get that, you need players that are actually proficient in that area. And I think they've been able to add a couple of those. So that has also been positive. Penalty killing to me is one that we still haven't seen enough of to be really confident in. I thought there were opportunities there, even though they struggled to get through the neutral zone. I thought Vegas' neutral zone defense was excellent in this game. But once they did get into the zone, I thought there were some dangerous moments that I was not thrilled to see in a lot of those spots. So that's kind of going to be interesting to see how the penalty kill gets on potentially without Stone for a little bit. And then, I think the key is just don't take penalties. And they've done a really good job of that to this point. Moving forward, and as we look forward to what's coming up, like I said, you've already got Carolina, Anaheim, Utah. Dad's trip, home game. Like, you got to hope you're able to get 4 or 5 points out of all of that. That's going to put them at 24. What is it? Say it's 4. 24 in the first, today was 14, 15, 16, 17. Like 24 and 17, that's pretty darn good. Like, that's plenty enough to where you want to be. We obviously are going to need the news about Stone to get more information about where we're at there, because that's going to be a problem if that's going to be a long-term thing. Hopefully it's not. But the road games coming up and that trip to Toronto, that trip, that trip is brutal. That trip's an absolute disaster. If you look at what it is, it's all the way across the country, and then it starts to come on the way back, and you have to play in Colorado, and then you get back and you've got a back-to-back with Winnipeg involved. Like, it's going to be difficult. This is not going to be an easy month, and the Golden Knights are going to have to find ways to kind of push through this. Like, they've got to find ways, in my opinion, to do a couple of things. One is they've got to figure out how to get their structure back in the neutral zone. They've got to be better at denying entry. Too often in this game, especially in the second period, it's happened in the second period basically all season long for a lot of these different games. The game opens up, and Vegas's blue line is not necessarily as high up the ice, and I don't know how much of that has to do with where the puck's turning over in the offensive zone, how much of that has to do with not reloading as hard, or the centers not getting back as often as they need to do, or some of it is you have very offensive minded wingers that are trying to get forward, and the Golden Knights are scoring a bunch of goals, so they're trying to get this offense going, and that's what leads to some of this coming back the way that it's coming, and you're not able to get these gaps as strong as what they've been. That has to return. Like, I think if this team's going to be successful long term and more importantly in the postseason, I think they're in pretty good shape to make the postseason. Stone's out for a long period of time. Maybe we have to reevaluate that a little bit. I still think should be fine. But if this team wants to take the step that we all want them to take, which is to be a playoff winner and a really dangerous team against very good teams in the postseason, 4 games out of 7, they're going to have to get back to that neutral zone structure. And then beyond that, I think they have to find a way to clog the middle of the ice a little bit better than we have seen. I thought today was a good example of a game that they didn't clog the middle quite as well. It started to get a little bit stretched out. When teams have played that low to high, Golden Knights have done a pretty good job of defending that low to high when the puck is shot from the point. We haven't seen a lot of tip goals. We haven't seen a lot of second chance goals right in front. But what's happened a little bit more, and we started to see it a little bit as we went on today, Montour was doing it a bunch, is they would hit that seam pass to a guy in the other circle, and that's where you end up very scrambly. Center has to make a difficult decision. There's a lot of bad things that can happen in that spot. And I thought that in this game, you started to see that get a little bit stretched out. And there's a lot of running around and not necessarily being confident in the defensive zone that I think has to happen if they're going to get to being a great team that is consistent against other great teams. Like, I'm not that worried about what it looks like against Seattle, against Utah, against Anaheim, against some of the bad teams that we're not that concerned about, or teams that aren't that great. It's like it's Dallas, it's Winnipeg, it's Colorado, and once Colorado gets to where they're supposed to get to, and we'll see if that ends up happening, it's those teams. Edmonton, better. That last game was better, but it's also a deficit that they need to overcome in the third period. And that was a game where McDavid was not McDavid. He just wasn't himself. Kind of, I don't know if he rushed himself back into that game, but to take advantage of that and find a way back into that game. But I didn't think they were great in front of the goal. The other side is the offensive side. Today, weren't great in front of the goal when the puck was laying there. There were a number of times where the puck is loose directly in front. I can remember one where Stevenson comes through and skates it away. I can remember the other that Eichel's there and has his stick tied up. I believe it was Larson that tied up his stick. Like, a lot of these things in this particular game just weren't quite good enough. I just didn't think they had the right mentality of winning to that battle, because I always thought they were outnumbered directly in front of the goal. You almost want to be even numbered in front of the goal in those situations, and it very rarely happened in this particular game, save for the one time where Dorofeev pulled it off to the side and it looked like he potentially might have finished it and tied the game up. They end up getting it later, but that was a great opportunity there. So that's one where I think that in this game wasn't good enough. I don't think it's been poor over the course of the season. So that's a huge positive. Now, without Stone, is there a correlation there? Without Stone, does it start to trickle down the lineup? And is he one that was always there and was always going to be in that top line, getting a majority of the ice time and getting those chances? Without him, maybe it does. So we'll see. If anybody has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I know there were a couple of them. Is there any news about Olofsson? There is not. The Golden Knights been on the road for a couple of days. When the Golden Knights are on the road, we obviously here in Vegas are not able to ask them questions. I did not travel up there this time to Seattle. I am going to Utah, so they are going to come back, and then I will be in Utah, so we should be able to get something after the Utah game if there's more information there. Basically, the way that it typically works is when a player is described as week to week or month to month, it's kind of understood that we don't ask every single day because they've told us it's week to week. So in this case, it's 1 week to the next week. The last week we asked, which was last week, he was still week to week. So we will see what will happen when they come back. I believe they're practicing. I don't know if it's tomorrow or Sunday. But we should get more information on him then. And then certainly at the worst, it'll be Monday morning before that game. What is your theory on the second period being so bad? So one of the things that I think is kind of part of the Cassidy system, which playing that zone system, is that the long change makes it difficult. That when the Golden Knights are at their best, they're breaking up a lot of these offensive zones entries before they even happen. They're forcing the puck to be thrown in deep, and they've got fresh bodies to go back and get it, fresh players along the walls to be able to get it and get it out. when the game starts to head in the wrong direction at times, especially in the second period, because they have to go farther to change, they spend a little bit more time in their own end. And you get what we call is like the wrong side of the line change, which is once you finally get out of the zone because you've been in there for most of your shift, you have to change. The other teams or the other next line's getting back on the ice, and the other team's bringing the puck right back at you, probably getting another pretty easy zone entry, and you end up having to spend more time in their zone. When the opposing team against a Cassidy team gets the puck in the offensive zone, Vegas is not overly aggressive trying to chase it, hound it down, and get it out. They more are concerned with how their structure is. So if a team plays it along the walls, all the way around, they get this long yellow puck shift where it's picking up all the paint from the bottom of the dasher board. They're going to spend more time in the defensive zone. It is a bit of a problem in the second period. It was a problem in the second period in Boston. It was a problem early in Cassidy's career here in Vegas. And now it has been a problem here. I think it is kind of just a little bit of a drawback of the system. I also think that Vegas's forecheck hasn't been as consistent this season. It's been better at home. It hasn't been as consistent on the road. Your forecheck has to be very good. When you throw the puck in and it's one-on-one, you've got to be able to challenge that puck and make it last a lot longer to allow the players to get into the zone, to allow people to get up to where they need to then allow when the puck comes back, the gaps are good and there's not easy entries going back the other way. I don't think they've been as good at that. And part of that is because I don't think that the wingers as a collective group are as good as they have been in the past. So that's kind of the way that I look at this. Is it a huge problem? I would say no. I do think there are going to be certain teams that we're going to look at, Carolina being one, that it's like this could be where games are lost. Golden Knights really haven't lost too many games in the second period to this point. Now, they've been amazing in the first period, very, very good in the third period. So that's probably why it hasn't been too bad. But if some of that draws back, if some of that slows down, they've got to find a way. And I think it's just be simpler. Like the exits can be simpler. The dump-ins can be simpler. Getting guys up and focusing more on structure in the neutral zone as opposed to trying to attack every single time they get the puck. I think that's something that they can potentially do and be more consistent with it. And that is something that Cassidy said earlier in the year, especially after that 3-game road trip where they lost all 3 of them. He said they were kind of looking at how they were exiting the zone and maybe thinking we do need to do a little glass and out, high flips, get it into the neutral zone, and allow some of these wingers that aren't as good in their own end to get some of these challenges more in the neutral zone and see if we can win some in the neutral zone. And if not, at the worst, at least the puck is across the blue line. They have to bring players back, and at the very least, it's expending energy before they come back in. So that's kind of my opinion on the second period. I don't think it's going to be a massive strength for the Golden Knights this season, but I also don't think that like the number of what it looks like right now is necessarily like this is maybe not necessarily the worst it can be, but I do think it's like this is probably slightly below average. I think average is still not great, but they can take steps in the right direction to get a little bit better. If this is Stone's back, will it be the end of the career? I would guess no. He's had a number of back issues. He's continued to fight back through them. They have a doctor who they're pretty confident in, and he's probably going to go back to that doctor if it ends up being that. And I think they're going to keep giving it a go. Until he doesn't look like the dominant player after one of these back injuries, he's going to keep trying to do it because that's who Mark Stone is. That's who the captain of this team is. I don't think that it's going to be as simple as we've got another back issue. You're just done. Like that's it. They're not going to do that. They're not going to look at that way because, and I'll stress this, the doctor that has done a majority of Stone's work and Eichel's work is very confident that he can get you back. And that's where I think they're probably going to go back to that and see where we go from there. So I would say no to that question. That being said, does it take a long time? Yes. I think they will be very, very cautious with it. And it wouldn't shock me if it's half the season. before he gets back, if it is indeed his back. So hopefully it is not. I saw somebody said they thought maybe it was a hip or a knee or something like that. Hopefully it is something more similar to that, but we shall see. What do we trade for at the deadline? I still think this is going to be one of the lesser active deadlines for the Golden Knights, simply because the cupboard of players and picks that they have to trade is simply not enough, right? Like, I don't think that they're in a position to go out and buy a superstar player without getting rid of a pretty damn good player off the roster already. Like, I just don't see that being likely. That being said, I don't think they're going to sit on their hands. Like, the McPhee history says they don't sit on their hands. He sit on his hands twice in like 26 years or something of that sort as an NHL GM. And I understand president of hockey operations, whatever. That still will likely be the mentality. I think they're going to look at where are we when they get there. If there are injuries, can you potentially find another Olofsson, another whoever? If it's a center that goes out, if it's whatever, that's probably step number one. Beyond that, I think they may be in the market for trying to find like another Teddy Bluger type player, fourth line type guy. That is going to be able to kill penalties, take some of the pressure off the top guys when we get there, and it won't be overly expensive. But that's kind of where I see that. Thanks again to the Jimmerson Law Firm for sponsoring all of the SinBin Periscopes this season and Twitter Spaces. We are not, I don't think, going to do it on Monday. Maybe if that game's crazy enough, maybe I will, but I do not plan on doing one on Monday. We will see on the road games. I am not doing one in Utah because I need to get out of there afterwards. So we will not be doing one in Utah. So maybe I guess I'll probably have to do something either after the Anaheim game or after Carolina. Maybe I'll just do it after Carolina because I have a feeling the Anaheim games, they're going to be an ass kicking in the positive. And I don't like doing them after ass kickings in the positive because it's boring. I like games more like today. Would have been nice if they would have won the game in overtime. But this was a much more enjoyable game to watch, and luckily I was ready to do this anyway, because I figure everybody has nothing else going on just like me on their Friday night, and thus you're watching this. Or if you're watching it later, nothing to do on your Saturday or Sunday. Welcome to my life where we have nothing to think about but the Golden Knights. It's fantastic, right? They're fine. They're fine. I know they lost this game. I know there's a lot of turnovers. I know some bad things happen in this game. They're fine. As long as Mark Stone is not out for some crazy amount of time, and they called him day to day, so hopefully that indicates he's not. As long as that's the case, they're fine. They're in good shape. We worry about let's just keep getting points. You get a point in this game. Yes, they maybe gave it away because it was a 2-0 game. Whatever. That's it. They're going to be fine. They're still near the top of the division. They're going to be fine on the road. I know that it looks a little frustrating at this point. They're going to be fine. Everything's going to be all right. That's all I got. See ya.